나는 how much you miss me. How much you miss me.
I just hope you'll be able to see your country the way that if you left it for 7 years, you would see it. I hope you just don't have to leave your country and your family for 7 years in order to feel that way. I hope you can feel that way today. That's what I would hope. But everyone's gone through stuff. And when you're kind to yourself and you're patient, that's the other thing. I know a lot of Russians, they feel helpless because your timelines are so long here. Like my American timeline, my country's only existed like for as long as some of your streets have. Like some of your newer streets in Moscow.
Ryazan is the best city on the planet.
It is. Ryazan rules. So you're actually prioritizing the information that you don't know versus the information that you do know. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but for me it sounds like Gen Z invented books because
I have ideas on this, but I'm curious because I assume identify as a Buddhist.
I identify myself as a Buddhist.
Do you?
No.
Oh, you don't?
No.
What do you identify yourself as?
A human being.
Good.
I need my questions actually because
You prepared questions? This is the most professional podcast I've ever been on.
Shut up.
I was on a podcast with, what's his name? Steve Kaufman. Do you know Steve Kaufman?
Yeah, I know. He is a linguist.
Yeah.
Self-proclaimed linguist, or maybe people call him linguist all the time because
He just runs a really big like language learning platform, and I guess he's fluent in like a bunch of languages. I never spoke with him in a different language, but I remember talking to him. We had 0 on the agenda. No questions, nothing. And it was hilarious because I think he was kind of prepared to like go through the motions of like, oh, how did you learn this language? And how did you do that? And I went crazy with it. A lot of it I couldn't use. Like a lot of it was like, what do you think about dragons? And it's just like, because if I want to know those answers about him, I'm sure I could find it somewhere.
How come did you invite him to the podcast?
Well, you know what's funny? I guess I kind of invited him. He had a guy reach out to me, one of his kind of underling guys reach out to me, and I was like, yeah, I would love to talk. Like, I knew who he was. I never interacted with him because I was too busy doing my own kind of thing. And they said he would like to talk to you. Would you want to like talk? And I was like, yeah, totally. And then I only found out like right before it was supposed to happen. They gave me questions that said, all right, so you're going to be interviewing him. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm interviewing. That's what this is? And I think that's probably my own fault because I assumed we would just be like talking and hanging out because I'm a very informal person. Like, obviously, if you can't tell by my dress suit, my Star Wars The Last Jedi.
Yeah, the best movie ever created.
You see what he's doing to me right now?
You said that you were informal.
I'm informal, yeah. So I went in going, I want to make a new friend. Like, I want to learn about, just get to know him. If I want to know his language method, I could download his app. And I'm sure he'll promote his app. That's what you always go on and you promote your own stuff. So I was like, he will tell me everything that he needs to know. But what inspires Steve Kaufman to make this app besides money? Like, how do you feel about fantasy? Do you like metal music? What kind of metal music? Would you drive a van that has one of those cool metal murals spray painted on the outside?
I don't have these questions. If you,
I don't need these questions from you. I
can come up with this.
No. It's whatever you have prepared, Alan, will be a delight. I'm happy to answer any questions. I was just saying that was what I'm saying is that was a bad interview. Maybe you'll have a better interview than what I gave.
I can tell you frankly that I've seen the interview because I was interested.
Oh, you watched it?
Yeah, I watched
it.
I watched the interview, not the whole thing, but
okay.
I was surprised to see. So when I typed down Steve Kaufman,
mm-hmm.
and one of the first videos that I saw, it was the video with you.
Mm-hmm.
It was profoundly interesting, to be honest.
Really?
I mean, it was strangely interesting, but maybe because I knew you at that time, I watched it. But it was interesting, really, to watch and listen to both of you, because I was interested in his approach and his techniques, because he knows Russian, he knows Japanese.
I think he worked in Russia for a while.
Yeah, he worked in Russia, and he knows Japanese, and he has an interesting approach when when you study a language. As we started with approaches and methods, what is your approach when you study a language? So you need to learn a new language like Japanese or Russian.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I should preface this with, this does require a preface. Why am I studying the language? That's the very first thing I have to do. When I was studying Japanese, the reason I studied that is vastly different than why I'm studying Russian now. The Japanese studying was like, I'm throwing everything I have into it. Everything, 10 hours a day. If I'm not working at a job, I'm spending every waking moment studying Japanese, listening to Japanese content. I think nowadays the trendy way to call that is mass immersion. But when I started 10 years ago, like, I didn't know that that was a thing. There's a big community called AJAT, all Japanese all the time. And I didn't know about them till way later. But it's this sort of idea where it's like, you almost kind of, min-max isn't the right word. It's like a speed run. Like, you're speed running the language. And I wasn't even trying to do that, but I was living in Japan and going to Japan, and Japan was kind of my life. And so I really was desperate to understand what people were saying to me and understand what I was reading and to be able to live there. So that approach is vastly different than what I'm doing for Russian today, because I have, like you, I have a support system of people here that speak my language. I did not have that in Japan. I don't have a super immediate need here, because I have the support system, to know the language to like a conversational level as like an emergency measure. So for me, my approach now, I would say, is like a more casual form of what I did. But the approach is kind of the same. So what I usually do is, before I do anything with grammar, before I do anything with like speaking or outputting, I focus on my input. And so what that does for me, it doesn't do me any good to know 2,000 words and to be able to form these kind of basic sentences with grammar if when you talk back to me, I don't understand a word you said, because you speak too fast, you speak too natively, you use slang, right? Like, it means nothing to me. On the opposite end, if I can understand 80% of what you're saying to me because I've inputted so much, so I can understand what you're saying, but I can't form my own sentences, I can actually have a conversation. Because in the first instance, I might be able to form like little sentences, but I have no way to get for me to understand you, because I haven't inputted enough. But in the other instance, I can understand what you're saying, and I can pull out my phone and Google Translate what I need to say back to you. So there can actually be this conversation that's happening. You see, so for me, prioritizing the input first is the most important. It's understanding the world around me. And what I usually do is I start with learning 10 words a day. When I was doing Japanese, I was doing 20 words a day, new words and phrases. And so this could be anything. In Russian, it'd be like "Здравствуйте" or "Меня зовут Chad." Like, each one of those would be a word. And it would expand to what we call semantic clusters, small clusters of words. I really shouldn't use like, fancy linguistic words.
No, you should use, actually, because it's the studies, the researchers of one of the most famous, I think, researchers of language, Chomsky.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that we think in clusters, and he wrote like a huge study about this, that you don't need to know one word, because one word is by definition it's unique, because if I say oak, right, oak tree, you have your own memories, and they are unique memories. But if I use this oak with an adjective describing this oak tree, now you have you have not only the context, you have the collocation that you can use, so like the cluster. So when our brain works with these clusters all the time, so we don't we process everything, but we work with groups of words rather than just one word.
Yeah, and the groups expand, which is the thing that no one tells you in language. Yeah. So like, this is why learning, I try to never learn single words except for like right at the beginning, and then right after I'm already conversational. Because words are never learned in isolation. Words are always in a broader context of things. So like, for instance, when I say bobcat, Well, it's all well and good for me to learn bobcat and have the picture in my head of the silly little cat with the ears in Colorado that, kills beavers. But if I say, hey, run to the store, the hardware store, go rent me a bobcat. For a lot of people that didn't grow up in the US, they don't have the context to know that Bobcat is one of our most famous tractor companies, and I'm asking you to go get me a big freaking machine so I can dig out my backyard. So there's small clusters that get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so even right now in Russian, I've learned 1,500 unique either words or small clusters, but they're never more than like a word or two. There's a really famous, I'm going to butcher his name. I'm so sorry, dude. I've actually emailed you and I'm sorry I can't remember your name. He's a linguist at the University of Hawaii in America. And he has this really great, I believe his PhD dissertation was on language acquisition, actually picking up a language. And he is talking about how to do it the most efficiently possible. And he has this formula called I plus one. Sorry, I plus one. I means intelligible input. And so what does he mean by that? Well, I could learn the word привет, hello, or hi, I guess, hi. Now, if you give me a 4-word sentence that starts with привет, that's fine, but then there's 4 words I don't know. So then what he would recommend is you learn something that is the one thing you already know, привет, and add one thing to it, like всем привет. It's something YouTubers in Russian usually say, right? When they first start, like всем привет, меня зовут blah 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 blah, then they start the day, right? And so every time you learn a new semantic cluster, you add one unknown thing to the rest that has to be intelligible. So even to that всем привет, you can then add something later if you want to that cluster, one extra thing. And eventually you get these long chains, but it takes a long time to do it. And I think his idea is so good because, like, if I'm trying to learn a whole sentence of like 4 or 5 new words, I have to remember 4 or 5 new words, and I have to remember the grammar structures that make them make sense, like how they're conjugated and what they are. Otherwise, the sentence doesn't make sense. Or I can learn something where I already know 2 words, and I just have to add one more thing to be good. And so what I do is I take these clusters and I throw them in. I have apps on my phone. And I use, do you know what spaced repetition systems are? Spaced repetition flashcards?
Not aware, no.
Okay, so this was unbelievably helpful to me when I was learning Japanese. I recommend it to everyone that's picking up a new language. You can use things like Anki. I use an app called Memrise. Mm-hmm. And I know this is bad podcasting, so I'll try to describe it more than show it.
I can actually attach the link to the application.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Even better. So, and there's a bunch of these different, Wanikani, there's a bunch of these different apps that are out there nowadays. The way spaced repetition works is if you have a flashcard of a word, well, it's kind of inefficient because let's say I have a stack of 100 cards, and I know the word hello very, very well. But I added a card last week that's actually pretty hard. Maybe it's, I can't even say it, the gallery, Tretyakovsky. Tretyakovsky.
Yeah, so when you separated this, it sounds much better. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's helpful. Well, anyway, so I've learned that word years ago, but I struggle with it, right? And so what happens is, if you treat each card in a cluster, I'm just using imaginary cards here, as all the same, you're actually wasting time. I really don't need to see the card for Привет ever. Like, I know it really, really well because I use it all the time. But the cards I don't know very well, I need to see those, if anything, more frequently because I don't know them as well. So what spaced repetition does is every time you see a card and you get it right, you won't see that card again for a period of time. So for example, if you get an answer right, so you're looking at your flashcards and you get it right, you'll see it again tomorrow. Now tomorrow you run flashcards and you get it right, you won't see it for 2 days. Then in 2 days, if you get it right, you won't see it for 3 days, and then 4 days, and then 5 days. So the period you won't see it for gets longer and longer and longer. So, and then the cards that you keep messing up with, that you just can't remember, you see them every single day. So you're actually prioritizing the information that you don't know versus the information that you do know. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but for me it sounds like Gen Z invented books because
I'm not even Gen Z.
sorry, pal. Sorry for the. It was a bad joke. I mean that in the books, I find it difficult with the flashcards and what the system that I use when I need to learn, acquire a language. I start reading a book, and because the words in the book and once you read the first pages, or it can be a short story, you read the first pages of the book or the story, you see that some words they repeat. So you can see them, you can track them down. What it takes efforts, yes, and you have to carefully scrutinize the first pages. And after that, you find out that the language there, this gibberish, it makes sense because you've seen those words before.
Yep.
I mean, the system with flashcard, with space repetition is unique, and it's very interesting. I found that it doesn't work because, once again, what you need to learn is way more, when you learn a language, is way more than just privet. If you really want to talk to people, to have a conversation.
Well, I'm starting with privet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this eventually, I know 1500 now. I'm getting to sentences that now have 4 or 5 words in them, like longer sentences. Yeah. And that's only 1500 words. It's really not that much. Like, I think people say kind of daily, really basic fundamental conversation is around 2000 words. And that's like very basic. So I'm still like, I'm in like the weeds. In Japanese, I know close to 14,000 words. And even then, there's tons of conversations I can't have. If the conversation moves to philosophy or to, physics and science, God help me. I don't know those words. But what I'm explaining is how I start. My issue with reading a book at the start is that there's no guarantee you'll see those words again. Like, you learn a word and it might be like a very obscure word that you'll just never use again. Or you'll learn a word and it's like a made up word. It's fictional. It's something the author made up. Or it's a play on words and or it's wrong. Like, authors use English wrong all the time. If you read Shakespeare, he used English words incorrectly. But because they were so popular, they became the new rule of English. So lots of people, like, if you've read Dostoevsky, Svetlana told me this, he butchers the Russian language in a lot of ways, but he did it in a way that then became a new standard of Russian.
He was desperate, and he wrote to pay for his bills and to pay for
gambling.
And gambling,
gambling debts.
Gambling debts as well. So when, for example, the Crime and Punishment, it was written like the old style, like a TV show. So he wrote like chapter by chapter, again and again. And in order to get money, he needed to write more. And sometimes he messed up the context because, the guy comes into the room and there are like a boy and a girl, children. But then the next scene, there are 2 girls in the room, or something like that.
Or he describes, he's like the rectangle, what is it? The circular table had corners or something like that.
Yeah,
and you're like, what?
But Dostoevsky is I know what you mean. Dostoevsky, and both Shakespeare and Dostoevsky, these are great poets, masters of word in those times, and they truly invented the whole new standard for the written and spoken language. I'm sorry for the interruption. You described the situation when you started learning new language, and at first you have to memorize all these new phrases, new collocations.
Yeah. And the reason, finishing up the book thing, because it plays into this, because you're not guaranteed to see those words again.
Right.
They're not, you might just forget them, which was a waste of time. So if you spent even a minute like learning a word, looking up its definition, and then maybe seeing some example sentences of how it's used to understand it, let's say you never see it again. That was a wasted minute that you could have spent learning a word that you would actually see more frequently. So what I'm explaining, this app, and it's not just this app, there's lots of, you can do this with physical cards, right? It's not just an app. The reason it's so efficient, and that's why I talk about efficiency, is that you are guaranteed to see that word again. And if you don't get it right, you're guaranteed to see it again tomorrow. But if you start to memorize it and you know it and it's deep in you, every time you see it, you end up getting it right. There's words I have even in Russian that I see maybe once a year now, which is what Privyet is now. I maybe see it once a year because it's so deep in me that I always get it right. But then I get to other very strange words. Like this whole week I was learning different words for balding in Russian, like being already bald and then like losing your hair. And then I learned he is bald versus he is balding and he will be bald. So see, all of those are different chunks of the same thing, and I'm learning the context for each one of them. And if I get them wrong, I'll see them all the time, and it'll just annoy the hell out of me because it'll remind me that someday my hair is going to be gone. And it'll force me to really want to get good at it. And if I'm really good at it, I won't see them as much. So it's optimizing. That's the whole reason you use the system. But it's not exclusive. Because really, at least with Japanese, when I learned 2,000 kind of words and different semantic sections, I felt good enough to start reading books and to start having more like in-depth conversations. You've heard my Russian, like when we try and talk, I can kind of form sentences, but it's very slow. It's jagged. The grammar's wrong. But if I speak to you, you can kind of go, oh, Chad means this.
I saw the sparks in your eyes. I noticed when you understand what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So, and you'd rather hide it.
Yeah.
if you don't want to, but maybe it's me, but it's very interesting to observe, and I think I'm really it's exciting that you are learning this language, that you've learned Japanese. Can we talk a little bit? Can I drive you back to the first journey, because the first big journey, big travel was in Japan. I think it's very inspirational for people to learn about and to know. Can you? And then we will return to Russia as well.
Worries.
Yeah.
So you want me to talk about how I learned it first, or how I went to Japan first? Like
how you went to Japan first and how you learned the language, because this story it fascinates me.
Yeah.
And I think, and then you can talk about the biggest cultural shock in Japan that maybe shocks, because it's not one wave probably.
Oh yeah, it's a tsunami of things. So I was graduating high school in America, and I just had no idea what I wanted to do at all. And in America, if you go to college, you're basically going to be in debt for the rest of your life. My mom is 60 and she still has student debt that she's not paying. She refuses. And no one's come to our front door about it. Ever. She hasn't paid it in like 20 years. But she does still have student debt. So my whole thing was I had friends that when I was a freshman in high school, they were seniors. They're basically done with school when I graduated my senior year. And none of them could get jobs. Because the job market it's similar in Russia. The job market's saturated. If everyone goes to college, the price for the jobs go down, the salaries go down because there's too many people applying. There's not enough jobs to go around. And the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So then everyone told me, go get a generic degree. It's like, oh, go $30,000 in debt to go study English where there's no job at the end of it. That sounds dumb. And what I did was I stopped listening to other people, because what I realized was we were living through a change that our parents didn't understand. In Russia, it's similar but different, because when your parents graduated from school, there was a job promised at the end. In the Soviet Union, it was like, you got a job. It may not be what you wanted, but you have a job. My parents, when they graduated from college, the job market was such that there would be a job. When I was graduating, I knew something that the school didn't teach me, that no one else was teaching, that there was nothing for you.
It was the same for our parents, for our grandparents back in the USSR. It was, as you described, but for our parents in the 90s, it was the same, desperate times of change when the whole system was changing.
Yeah. So, and I don't mean to put that on you. I was just saying I've learned about a lot of Russia.
I'm just trying to put some context into
That's good
for the listeners about Russia.
So I saw the trap, because I had so many friends that they went to school for things that I thought I would want to do. Like I had a friend that went to Berkeley School of Music, which is like one of the best schools of music ever. And to this day, he's a waiter. And I'm like, I don't want to go. He probably is $100,000 in debt because he went to such a good school and he's waiting tables. And I was like, I don't want this. And the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. So I stop listening to people that are trying to give me bad advice, and I go, what do I actually want to do? Like, when I think about a job, what could I do and do it even in poverty? Like, what could I barely scrape by to do and I would feel fulfilled? What would make me happy? No one talks about that because everyone thinks money's what makes you happy, but I know a lot of sad millionaires in America. I know a lot of marriages that crumble in rich families. But I know a lot of people that do really weird, interesting stuff, like publish their own books, they run their own podcast, and they make almost nothing. Like, their podcast is very small, but they make enough to like support their wife and their one kid. And they're the happiest people I've ever met. And so I had to come to this term where I was like, back then, I don't know what I want to do, but I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to, all this other stuff. What do I want to do? And I didn't even know. High school didn't even give me a preparedness to be like, I like this thing. I just remember being nerdy, and I liked anime, and I liked manga, and I liked playing Magic the Gathering, like the card. I was a nerd. And so I was like, I need to do something extremely drastic. Drastic times call for drastic measures. If I just sit here in my parents' basement, eventually they're going to throw me out. I'll be 25. They'll be like, Chad, get out of our house. And then I'll be trapped because then I have to pay for expensive rent and I have to go get a horrible job that I'll never be able to save enough to escape it. And so I realized I had the short period. I was like, I need to make a change. So I took everything in my bedroom that wasn't nailed to the floor or that wasn't my parents, because I just turned 18 and I can't sell their stuff. And I sold it. And I bought a round trip ticket to Japan for a month. Because I was a nerd, I know I like anime, I like manga, but I don't know what I want. But I like it there. I like that stuff. So maybe there's something there for me. My parents were, I don't know if they're furious. I know they were nervous and scared. I'd never left the country. I barely left my state. Like, imagine never leaving Rizan, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to Japan.
Rizan is the best city on the planet.
It is. Rizan rules. But it's like, imagine not doing that, right? And I was like, I know, I'm such a homebody. I never want to leave my house. I just want to play my games. I want to read my books. I want to watch my anime. I don't want to go anywhere. And I knew if I didn't do something tremendously drastic, I would never actually do it. I would never break out of that shell to do something great. So I had to do something that was so uncomfortable, because like a comfortable thing would be, why don't I go to Japan for a week? Everyone goes to Japan for a week. It doesn't change anyone's life. They never learn anything. Every time people come back, they just go, oh, it was really pretty. I took a lot of pictures. I talked to some guy that spoke English in a pub about politics, and oh, I feel so deep, and it's all ego. It's ego, ego, ego. And I was like, I don't want that. Like, I want something deeper. And so I went for a month, not because the month was anything in particular. It was longer than a short trip. Like, if I moved to Austria for a month, I would say I lived in Austria. If I went to Austria for a week, I would say I visited Austria. That's kind of how my mind was. And the other thing was I had no money. So like, I really could only afford to go for like a month. That was like, I had $200 for food, and that's it. I had no savings. I had no plan. If my flight got delayed, I couldn't eat. But I was like, I have to do it. And I met up with a church. I stayed, I couldn't afford to live there. I couldn't afford an Airbnb or hotel. So I slept in a church cabinet. The guy at the church was like, and I wasn't a member of his church or anything. He was just like, yeah, you can stay with us. He's from Australia. Shout out Alistair. He's a great guy. And they literally have like a closet in this church. And they were like, you can stay in this closet. And I was like, I will gladly stay in your closet. And I ended up helping fix up the church during that time. Didn't plan to, but I did. I ended up making tons of friends at that church. I ended up running this hot dog thing, so that way people coming home from their work could come and have free hot dogs and talk English with me, like practice their English for free. There's no bait and switch. I'm not trying to get them in the church. This was outside of the church. It was like in front. I just wanted to give people hot dogs and make friends and like practice my English. It gave me like a purpose in life. And then what happened was I realized, helping this church and doing all this church work, I loved it. I absolutely loved talking with people and helping people. And I'm not really an English teacher, but like someone might have an English question and I don't know phonics. I don't know like difference between passive and possessives or anything like that. But because I'm a native, just like if you're Russian, you might not know the word for the thing, but you can kind of intuitively know if something's not right. So I could help them in that way. And I did it for free. I just wanted to help people. And realizing that, I was like, man, I could really make a go of this. This might be something I could do. But I realized very quick, most people don't speak English at all. Like I lived in Fukuoka. It's not Tokyo. And this was 10 years ago. So this was there's no English anywhere. There's no English really support for anything. You really had to know the language to connect to these people, to make friends. And so I kind of went, all right, I need to study the language. Well, now I have a goal in life. Now I have something to like go for. But I also couldn't go to college because it was just so expensive. There's no point. So I was like, how can I self-study and also stay in Japan? And I found language schools. And I found a language school, Genki, and several others. The YMCA that's over there does it too, and a bunch of other ones. But I'm mostly known for the Genki series I did. Genki's a school. And I got accepted. I went there, and in a month, I outpaced the school. Because I was so driven, so motivated, that I finished the entire textbook that was supposed to take 6 months in 1 month. And they didn't know what to do with me. So they said, all right, how about this? Go home, reapply for the long-term student visa, and then come back and we'll help you get fluent. So I did that. I go back, and now I'm there on a 6-month reoccurring visa that I can stay for as long as I want, and I can always extend it. And I outpaced them again. It took 2 weeks. I outpaced them. And we had a lot of these legal problems with them and struggles with them. It's all water under the bridge now. But what it taught me was these schools aren't going to get me fluent. It's an attitude I have today with everything that I study, because I have to recognize these schools aren't going to get me where I want to go. I know a lot of people after, I get over 500,000 views a year on my YouTube channel alone. I've met a lot of people that went to school for Japanese that I was better than them when they graduated in my first year of studying Japanese. Because they relied on the school, and the schools, most people can leave probably being upper beginner, lower intermediate. The people that get fluent study on their own, and they break their backs trying to study and get really good. Like, the schools won't get you there. And so after studying there and realizing the school's kind of BS, I just studied myself. I got my own Japanese friends. I got so good, I started businesses. So I started an importing and exporting business because I could read legal Japanese documents now. So I knew how to export and import and do taxes and stuff. I started a tour guiding business that was very successful. Like it just the YouTube and the tour guiding business was all I did for 9 years as a job. And after all this stuff, I had all this great successes, all this great stuff planned. COVID hit, and I got stuck in the US. And my Japanese started to go down quite a bit, so I was like, I'm gonna hop on something to help me find some more natives just to keep my Japanese level up. I'm sorry I'm talking so much. This is a 10-year journey.
It's interesting. I asked you to talk about this because I think that you missed you didn't talk about so many details.
I know there's so much.
Yeah, there is so much. Can you tell the story of how did you first start learning Japanese when you brought beer to the guys?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. So when I was in Japan, I had, even outpacing the school, I really couldn't talk to people because I was still developing my method because I had to do this alone. The school wasn't going to help me. So I had to figure this all out on my own. And I realized I really needed natives to help me. I needed people that knew the language that could correct me and to help me figure stuff out. But I was a very shy kid. I like Magic the Gathering. I like anime. I'm not this social butterfly. And especially in a country where I don't speak the language. Like, that's not helping me at all. And so I for so long, I was so lonely, and I tried to make friends, but it was just so hard. And one hot day, it was boiling hot, it was roasting, it was the summer in Japan. And even I was just sweating, I was dying, I was broke, I had no money for anything. And what I did was I was walking past Canal City. There's a really famous spot there on Canal City where skateboarders always hang and skateboard. And I just saw them, and they looked like they were dying too. They were just sweating, like panting, and they looked tired and they looked thirsty. And I was like, I don't know, something in my head went, this is my chance. Like, you need to be awkward and brave for like 5 seconds. Because if they turn you down, you're not any poorer. You're out maybe $10 in beer. But if it works, the upside is so high. The benefit is so high that the risk was worth it. So I ran to the convenience store. I spent my last $10 on beer and on water bottles. $10 in Japan got you a lot more back then. But I had 2 big bags full of ice cold beers and waters. And I went up to them and they all look at me. I'm almost 2 meters tall. I'm like 187, 189, something like that. White American kid holding 2 bags of convenience store Japanese beer that I don't even know what they are. I don't drink. I can't read them. And they looked at me like, what? And I just held the bags out because I couldn't say anything else. I was just like, and they looked at the bag and they looked back at me and they looked at the bag and looked back at me and they all started to laugh. And my first thought is, oh no, this is the worst. This is when the popular kids laugh at you at school. They grabbed the bags, they started handing them out. All the skateboarders all went, vroom. They all came to me and they're all laughing and talking and they tried speaking Japanese and I really couldn't do anything and they tried their English. And the nice thing was their English was not great either. And I don't mean, hopefully, if you guys are watching this, this isn't meant to be an insult. A lot of, like, Lynn and Yuki ended up having very good English after a while. But they didn't really speak English very well either. So we kind of connected. We're like, both of us can't really talk to each other. But we really want to. They want to know why I brought them beer just now, having never met them. I want to know why they laughed and why they're talking to me. And so we sat there night after night after night, week after week after week, talking to each other, laughing that we messed it up, trying to figure stuff out. I used to go there right after school, and I would sit with my books and study and ask them questions, and eventually both of us got quite proficient. Like their English was enough to explain, and my Japanese was enough to finally meet in the middle, and I made some of the best friends I've ever made in my entire life. But it took that first risk. Like it's the same thing that happened when I went to Japan. Like selling everything you own and taking a flight to the other side of the world to a country where you know no one, you don't know the language, and you don't have a hotel. That's a massive risk. But it changed my life. I wouldn't be here in Russia without doing that, because if I didn't do there, I definitely wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have the courage to go across the world randomly. I wouldn't have met Svetlana on that conversation exchange website where we eventually made our own. I met you two, you and your lovely wife.
Do you know the other side of the story is that I recommended the website, the pen pals, to Svetlana.
No way.
Because she asked me, like, I told her that my approach is always, when you want to acquire a language, you have to talk to people. Wow. You have to be brave enough. You have to be courageous enough to start a conversation. Awkward as it is, or it may be, you have to give it a try. So we were sitting in the kitchen, and she asked me, like, how can I get better? I said that you have to read. You have to, like, the immersion system that you've described, you have to read, you have to watch, you have to listen, and you have to talk. So this is the most important factor. You have to talk, and you have to find people, and you have to become a conversationalist. You have to, create stories, and you have to listen to people's stories. You have to become a very good listener. So I said, you can do that on Omegle or pen pals. And she tried this one, and she met you, and then we met you afterwards.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone knows the story, but it's a really cool story. I know it's not the Japanese stuff still, but so when me and Svetlana were talking for a while because she wanted to work on English on that website, and she introduced me to Russian fairy tales, and I had no connection to Russia. Nothing, no desire to go to Russia, I just didn't know anything about it. Like, Americans never really learned that much about Russia in school, so it was just not something I ever really thought of. It would be like if you said, do you know Nigerian fairy tales? I'd be like, no, why would I know Nigerian fairy tales? And then she started to read them to me, and I realized how they are so colorful, they're so unique compared to anywhere I've been. And I've read Japanese fairy tales, American fairy tales, German and British fairy tales, and they're just so different, and they're so cool. And I just couldn't believe that so many more people in the West hadn't heard of these before. Right now, there's a little bit of a renaissance of, like, Slavophiles in the West, which sounds kind of weird because of the timing. But there really is, like, there's a big resurgence right now of people that read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and fairy tales and stuff. But when we made that book, it really wasn't coming up yet. we kind of caught like the very start of that wave of where stuff was coming up. And so she recommended Alan and your wife, now wife, back then girlfriend, like, hey, why don't we try and translate some of these works together? So that's how I got started getting connected to Russia, because we did that and I thought it was so cool. And she was like, well, why don't you come visit Russia? Like, you can actually see what it was like. And I was like, well, I've already done the Japanese thing. I've always been brave enough to try that. I could spend a month in Russia. And I finally went to Russia and it was amazing. And I got stuck. And it's a year and a half and I'm still here. But that's why that bravery thing is so important for me. Is like, I would never do it if it wasn't for that fact that at 18, I was like, all right, time to be brave. But that's where it all came from.
And it turned out to be a journey, really. So it's like the journey that is described in Joseph Campbell's stories, or Prop, a famous Russian folklorist. So they tell a story about the journey that we make, and yeah, you have to be stupid enough and brave enough to try. So, but it turned out to be a book, and like,
yeah, this guy. This is the first part of our little baby. I don't know. Oh, here, can I hold up here? This is the first part of kind of our brainchild that started. And I think, I don't want to announce it here if it's too. Is part 2 coming out?
someday.
Someday.
Yeah.
So there is a part 2 that's coming out that we didn't get to finish by the time that one came out, but now it's finally done.
Yeah, it's done. The editing is done. Everything is done, and some last preparations, and it's gonna be over. So it took us 3 years to create this, and like, could you have ever imagined that, strangely as it is, you are gonna be in Russia, and you're gonna be studying Russian folklore for some reason. So how can I ask you a question about a very Russian question?
Sure.
What is the meaning of life? And has it changed? Has the meaning of life changed when you visited Japan and when you visited Russia?
When I think of the meaning of life, I immediately go back to first causes, which I know is very scholastic of me, but I'm Western and I don't know, I think in scholastic categories. When I went to Japan, I was a Christian, but I wasn't very, I don't know if literate's the right term, but it was more of I don't know how to say this without degrading myself, because I really was a Christian, but it wasn't a profound faith. It wasn't super deep. And as I continued to study, this is a whole different thing of how I began studying all this stuff and became a Christian, because I wasn't raised a Christian. I started to realize things like everything in the world has like a telos. Telos is a final goal that it goes towards. The heart's goal is to pump blood to keep you alive. Your eye's goal is to see things. Like, that's its final goal, is to do that. And when you look, why are humans around? Like, as a whole, what is our telos? What is our final goal? And I think it has something to do with the reason we were made. Like, I think the reason the heart exists, in part, is to preserve our life. And that telos was made by something to preserve us. And so I think the same thing happens with us. And it's a very profound question. And it has changed since Japan, because I never thought about this stuff when I was in Japan. I was too, I'm like a horse with the eye things. Yeah. It's like only Japanese, and don't blink, and don't breathe, and don't sleep, and just this for like 10 years. But I finally I got into graduate school. I went to seminary, which is a religious education. It's to get a master's degree in divinity. It's what priests and pastors and professors of religion and philosophy, they get usually MDivs of some sort. And that's when I started thinking about this stuff more in depth. And I think that now that meaning has something to do with the connection between the very first cause, what I call God, and me. But what that is, I don't know for certain yet. It's a deep, profound mystery.
When we were heading towards St. Petersburg together in one car, backed, we had this brief conversation about religion in your life and the meaning of life as well. So I remember I was talking about Indra's net. It's in Hinduism. It is the connection. It's like the dots. Every soul is connected to each other, and they are all connected to one united God within us. So I was talking about this concept, and now you're talking about like your soul. It's sort of attached, like there are strands or connections to God. So can I ask you a question first of all, as a Christian, what is God to you? And how do you see God? Is it like a huge cosmic being that has conceived everything that exists here in this universe? Or is it one thing, or are there many things? Because people believe in different gods. There are different religions. Back in the kitchen, we were discussing some people's beliefs. And
you guys missed a great conversation in the kitchen. Next time we do this, I'm going to just hit record on my phone, and we'll have a preamble to the thing.
So what is God to you? Suppose a simpler question.
I will try and be concise, and then I'll break it down. But the concise answer is, I think he is the unmoved mover of everything. So what do I mean by unmoved mover? In school, we read a lot of Plato. Now, Plato was not a Christian. He was a pagan. But he was, strangely, as far as I remember, he was put to death because he was promoting atheism. And by atheism, he was promoting a single being above the pantheistic gods that created all of them. So he believed in the pantheistic gods, but he used reason and logic to show that there's something above them. And they said that made him an atheist because he was denying all these other gods. Believing in one god apparently made you an atheist back then.
In ancient Greece?
In ancient Greece, yeah. So when I talk about this, what I mean is I look at a world as many things in motion, many small things that just constantly are moving. You poured a glass of water just now, which came from you opening the faucet, which came from a pressurized system that went to a treatment plant that came from a well, and that came from the sky, and then that was evaporated up from the ground. Like it's this whole big domino set. When I think of stuff like that, the dominoes you can kind of mentally refold them up as they get knocked down. And it keeps going back, and it keeps going back, and it keeps going back. And you can even get it to like the Big Bang, right? That singularity, what the scientists call. But I always have this problem that reminds me of an acorn. Do you know what acorns are? Like the little nut?
Yep.
Okay, good. Good. So when I think of an acorn, and I'm using like Thomas Aquinas here a bit just for language. It's in Plato, but Plato phrases these kind of weird. So have you ever heard of what is it? It's potentials, and I think it's called actuals. I haven't taken any philosophy classes in a while, but have you heard of these categories before?
Yep.
Okay, so a acorn itself is actually an acorn. Like in its essence, it is this acorn. It is not a dove, it is not a guitar, it is not the air, it is an acorn. It has the potential to be a giant oak tree. But it's not an oak tree right now, but it has the potential to become an oak tree if other things that are actual, meaning real, like water, is poured on it. If it's buried in soil, if it's given light and time, it could grow into a thing, into a tree. Well, the problem is actuals need anything that has potential. So this thing that can become a tree needs actuals to act upon it. So this acorn in and of itself, by itself, cannot become a tree. If it was devoid of water and time and sunlight and soil, it would never become a tree. It has to have these outside forces acting upon it in order for that to happen. So this is my problem with infinite regress theory. Is it presupposes an acorn without the pre-existing tree that made it.
there is a scientist, I believe his name is Brian Greene. He wrote a book about time. He's a physicist. So he wrote a book about time and the Big Bang and the appearance of time, how time appeared, and why we have time. So first thing he talks about when he talks about the Big Bang, he talks about not just one event, but about a series of events. How they appeared, however, it's still unknown to us, and we are absolutely we're not aware how from this tiny pin dot, which was like boiling substance, it started to expand. It exploded and it started expanding, and it's still expanding with an extreme speed. It's accelerating. It's interesting to hear your analogy about an acorn. I've never heard this, and it's really interesting, and it's profoundly accurate. So it's a correct question to ask, what is God and how everything appeared, because we don't know what was the first one. So what was it, the chicken or the egg? How did it appear? What were the conditions for it to appear? What is your take? Can I ask you this question? What is your take on the Big Bang as this huge event that happened? So what is this? What is the universe? Because we live on a small like rock that is flying in space.
We're a bunch of monkeys flying through space. Yeah, I know the feeling. The prisoners are in charge of the prison. My thing is that that singularity, that potential, right? The actual is that it's a pinpoint. The potential is that it could be our universe. I think just like the acorn, it requires stuff to actually get it to become to make its potential actual. Meaning, again, devoid of everything else. An acorn, no light, no sun, no water, doesn't change. I think that singularity, unless something acts upon it, doesn't become the universe. I think that there was something that acted upon it.
Have you seen the movie called Men in Black?
I have.
The first one.
Yeah, I have.
The ending scene of the movie is that there are galaxies, and it's like it's distancing from all the galaxies. So you're flying away from all of this, and you sort of get the 3D reality of this. So before it was like 2D, and now you are seeing the 3D scale, and you see that there is a huge alien with like tentacles, and it's just gathering these galaxies in bowls and just playing a game.
It's playing marbles with them, right?
Marbles with them. So it's when I saw this movie when I was a kid, I was interested how everything around us appeared. So your take and your approach to religion, I know that you used to be a Buddhist.
Yeah, well, I started as kind of an atheist, but not wanting to be.
Right.
When you come from a world that tells you what is real is what you can experience, it's empirical.
Palpable experience.
It's materialism.
Yeah.
It's the only stuff that's real is what I can touch, see, feel, and taste.
Right.
You're almost born into skepticism. Like you just don't even know how to handle anything else. But then when you keep growing up, you learn things like there are natural truths that are not like, I can't touch a truth, I can't taste a truth, I can't see a truth or smell a truth, but I can know a truth up here. And that means that there are things in life that are immaterial. They're immaterial things like goodness, righteousness, right? So let's just take goodness, for instance. I can't taste goodness. And by goodness, I don't mean a good tasting thing. When a mom comforts a crying orphan in the street, that's goodness. I can't measure that. And it's not a chemical process in my brain. It's not like love. Love can kind of be, a chemical process. There's no chemical process for righteousness, which is right living with other people. There's no measuring that. There's not measuring it empirically, right? But we live in a world where there's goodness. We live in a world where there's evil. We live in a world where there's mathematical truths that would exist even if we aren't there to comprehend it. And that aren't in reality, right? That aren't, empirically provable things. These are immaterial truths, which means the truth doesn't have to be material. There's things that don't have material that are true. All I'm saying when I talk about this stuff is that when I talk about God, I don't need a measuring tape, because I can use this up here. And that's not even getting into faith. Faith is a different thing that I'm talking about. I think you can get you can become a theist with just logic and reason. Plato, he was a theist. He believed in God. He believed in gods, many gods, right? Because he was a pagan. But I have a very hard time understanding a strictly atheistic understanding of the world and a materialist, like a Kantian form of the world, because there is non-material true things. That means that not everything is explained by science, because science is empirical. It's what can we understand? And it's a good thing. I love science. It's what can I understand with my senses. But when something is extrasensory, beyond our senses, we almost make it seem like, oh, well, that's psychics and aliens and Bigfoot, it's all that stuff. But really what that means is just things that our empirical senses don't understand. And you either need logic, reason, morals, ethics, religion, philosophy, something that's higher than that in order to understand it. And I think the great sadness of the 19th century, like 20th century, it's this whole Nietzschean idea of like, God's dead and we're what's left, and so we're going to handle this. And in every country that essentially tried to kill God, it just went horrible. Whatever God it was, you could have, like in China, the God was, what's the traditional Chinese? I just read a book about this like 2 years ago. I hate myself now. Anyways, it's not just it's any conception of something higher than just what is materially known leads to something tragic and horrible. And it's for me, at least, when I think about what God is and what all this stuff is, it's like, it's the unmoved mover. And who is he or she or they? Because is it one? Is it multiple? Using logic, I think you can get to logically that there is someone there, that they actually desire to interact with us. That's the interesting one, is the interactive one. I'm talking so much. I feel like
no, it's okay. So you can ask questions if you like, but because I don't want you to feel like you're being interviewed and I'm the only one who is the interviewer.
I'm used to a conversation more than just this. I just have a lot of ideas on this, but I'm curious because I assume identify as a Buddhist.
I identify myself as a Buddhist.
Do you?
No.
Oh, you don't?
No.
What do you identify yourself as?
A human being.
Good.
I haven't discovered God within me and God anywhere else. I'm assuming I'm listening to people, and I like to have conversations about religion and God and everything, like the universe, how we were created. So I'm an atheist, and I can say that I used to be agnostic. So I assume that there is something bigger than just me and my stupid head, floating here in space. I haven't found it yet, and I haven't discovered. I know that there are the psychic ability that people talk about, that they can feel the God. I believe that it's all chemical imbalance or balance in our heads. So the molecules, the work of molecules at hand, and the fact is, the molecules, they can, like the particles, they are connect. Some particles, all of them are connected, but some of them, they can be like at a great distance from each other, and they still, if you interact with one, as you said, interacting with something, so like touching, feeling, sensing it. And there are something extrasensorical, of course, that we can't really see or taste or explain, but we feel that there is like righteousness, right, or goodness in people. So I think that there is people are going to discover new concepts soon, because it's like the Renaissance epoch right now, because people are trying to find sense, the meaning of all of this. I believe that because most of the people get educated, and they have access to books, and they can read Plato, for example. And but I haven't discovered, so I haven't found. My mom is a Buddhist. My grandmother is an Orthodox Christian. She used to read books about Buddhism, but then after her husband died, she found peace in God, and she's right now she's talking a lot about God. There's my mom too. My father isn't. I can say that he's an atheist, but I think that he's not an atheist. So he doesn't talk about this. So this is about my family. I think that there is something great. So I like to study. So I like the approach when you actually study the question, when you research, and I like the journey.
Yeah.
And I like, because you have a different system in your head, and you have a different understanding of what is going on around you.
Yeah.
So that's why I find it interesting.
I don't know if my understanding is different. I think I just came at it from such a weird place, because I came at it I didn't come from a Christian background. I came from essentially a secular kind of raising, where my family was like, yeah, if you believe in anything or nothing, it's fine. And I was very dissatisfied after I figured out that when I was convinced that there is an unmoved mover, like you hear that argument, you go, and then you look for the arguments against it, which I looked up quite a lot, and it was just so shallow, and it didn't address the points at all. And when I hear their objections, it sounds almost absurdist. Like it's almost like an absurd reality, because they're like, it takes like morality and makes it objective. So
it's hard to accept this. When you talk about this unmoved mover, it's hard to accept this. It's hard to take responsibility for your life, for your own life. And imagine that you have to take responsibility for someone else, like the divine creature that lives somewhere in the skies, and it's ethereal, and you can't really, feel
I can't touch it.
Yeah.
So like, how am I supposed to, like with you, I can call you on the phone and be like, hey, Alan, you want to come talk? Do you want to like hang out and eat kielbasa or whatever? But what if I can't do that with God? Or what if I can do that with God? But if I talk to him, am I talking to myself in my head? And so that's why I so much of this dialogue was so unhelpful for me until I started exploring other theistic views. Because when I think I told you this in the car, I'm from America. I could walk into any church. We have everybody. We even have the craziest of the crazies of Christians. We have everybody. And I was like, almost kind of systematizing my religious, my walk, like trying to figure out the journey, because the same thing I do with Japanese, it's a system, because I'm like, I'll prioritize Christianity at the bottom. It's a little bit ego, because I was like, there's no way Christianity's right at the beginning. And the other one was that it was so hard to find, like, Eastern churches for the Chinese beliefs, Shintoism in Japan, Buddhism, there's many forms of Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. I went to a Sikh temple a couple of times, and I was like, I'm going to prioritize that first because I don't know anything about it. And then if I find that this doesn't satisfy, well, I can always go to Christianity, but they're not right. So what ended up happening was I went through all these, I kept following that same urge where I go, there's an unmoved mover somewhere. And so I would study the philosophy of these different beliefs, not really their doctrines or their practices. I would study like the underlying theology, I guess they would call it, the study of, oh, I'm so sorry. I hope that doesn't sound horrible.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm gonna fix it.
We'll just cut that. Yes, I see the spike. Oh no. Well, good luck. And for me, coming to a single deity, because this is what Plato had the problem with. His ideas eventually led to there being one, not plural. And that was the problem, because you have this idea of like, I'm going to do this so bad. I think it's his teleological argument or his ontological argument. I don't remember. But it's this idea that we have concepts in this world that help instruct naturally, like without reading a Bible or a Quran. There's these ideas that tell us about whatever that mover is. So if, for instance, I were to listen to one of your songs, just by listening to your songs and not necessarily directly talking to you, I can probably glean quite a bit about you from your music. Not everything. I probably can't know your favorite color. I probably don't know what you look like. But I can hear your voice. And you sound very, you have a deeper voice. You're probably a guy. Nastia's probably a girl. Just probably here. I know it's 2023 and that's a very controversial topic, but you know what I mean. You speak English. So, all right, he probably has some connection to like the English language or the West in some way. You have a little bit, like a kiss of like a British accent.
A tinge of an accent.
A tinge of a British accent, which tells me either you're maybe from England or maybe you have a British parent or something like that. But you only hear it a little bit.
I'm from Razan. No.
Well, I know
neither.
you're from Razan. But you have a twinge of something. Maybe your teacher had like a British accent or something. I can learn probably a bit about what you believe from your songs. A little bit, right? So it's not this full picture, but you can get tiny little things. When I look at our world, I see lots and lots of organization. I don't see a lot of chaos. I see a sun that is calculatable to go down at a certain time and calculatable to come up at a certain time. I see stars that we can go back 2,000 years in programs and know exactly where the stars were in the sky. I see gravity, a rule that is indefiable, that is calculatable to a T, that we can know exactly how fast something drops. There's order in the world. Everything here that's created weirdly has an order. And funnily enough, the stuff that we kind of look at as not very good is the disorganized stuff, the stuff that goes against order. So that tells me something. The thing, whatever that first mover was, is organized. There's order. It makes sense. It's sort of like looking at a computer. I can tell the person that designed it has order. There's a system. There's systematized, right? So whatever it is, it's not like Gnostic chaos. It's not the demiurge from Gnostics. Have you ever read any like Gnostic texts at all?
No.
Don't. But it's not the demiurge. I'll just put that out there. If anyone's wondering, it's not the demiurge. So then I go to religion. I go, is this God organized? And for the most part, most of them say yeah. Most of them are yes. Gnostics don't, because they have kind of two competing gods. They have this god of order and stuff, and they have essentially a devil, which is the demiurge, and that's like chaos. Chaos reigns. And so that one to me doesn't make a lot of sense. The idea that it made consciousness. So for instance, if you're going to make something, you essentially have to have a higher capability than that thing. So if I'm going to make a computer, I have to know how that computer works, and I have to be able to make that computer. Otherwise, I can't make it. Like it's obviously not randomly put together, because we just talked about that. It's systematically put together. It's organized. And in that organization, I would have to know about batteries and voltages and keys and software. So I'd have to know basically everything about it to be able to make it, which means this is not higher than me in terms of what what it does. I'm higher than it. I've made the thing. There's an old American saying, you have to be smarter than the tool to use it. And it's meant as an insult. Like, if you're going to use that hammer, you have to be smarter than the hammer, right? So if we have reason and intellect and emotions, something that made us has all of those to a higher degree. It's not chaos. It's not nothing. It didn't fall into place. It's systematized. And because we have these qualities, they have qualities that are better. In other words, if I'm going to think of a character, if I'm going to create like a Lord of the Rings character, for instance, every character in that book only has the knowledge that I have. I've made those characters. They don't have some secret knowledge that I don't know about. I made them. So everything that they know, I know. And I actually know more than that character. Frodo does not know more about Frodo's journey and about what Frodo can do than Tolkien knew. Tolkien knew every inch of Frodo and every inch about that world, and he knew things that Frodo didn't know because he made the world, right? That's how God is with us. What I call God, obviously. I'm kind of projecting here. So that's what I'm so sorry I'm rambling, but this is what I mean when I go, I can tell that there's something up there. I can tell that the world's organized, so he has a organized composite of the universe. And I can tell that with us, because I'm looking at a reflection of this world, he has these aspects, or she, or they, or whatever, right? And I can kind of narrow stuff down a bit. I can go, all right, well, now we're getting to some really interesting concepts. There are warlord pagan gods that are like just completely, almost brutalistic. But I look at humans and I see mercy, and I see peace and love and humility and these really high virtues. And again, it narrows stuff down because you go, all right, I don't think that pagan god that's all about like war and I'm trying to say not bad words on here, but words that start with R and end in like ape and other things. Like there's gods that are all about that stuff, or gods are about sacrificing babies or young virgins, right? All sorts of weird stuff. And so you can kind of narrow things down a bit, and then you get to this point where, all right, I'm a theist. And there's kind of this thread. It comes down to like certain Eastern philosophies, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, probably not most forms of paganism. Most forms, I'm not saying all because I don't know. There's probably plenty of forms that have a lot of what I'm talking about. There's pagan forms here in Russia I didn't know anything about. Like the Far East has really cool stuff that I have never studied. But yeah, that's how you start. You kind of tread this path. And then the final thing I'll say, and I promise is the final thing, was the concept that if this God never wanted to be found, I would never find it. Right? Like if it just created and left us, I would have no way of knowing. And thus, no harm, no foul. No problem if I don't learn about it. The other side of that is that this first cause wants to know about us, or wants to interact with us, or wants to be known by us in some way. Because there's only two routes. Either doesn't want to be known and it won't be found because I'm not infinite and I'm not going to be able to search infinity to find it, or it does. And since the other one is pointless, it leads to just nihilism and absurdism, a God that made us and left us. The other option is it does. So I just devoted my life to the other side, which is, what if there's this being that does want to know us?
So it means that there is hope actually in this.
Yeah.
There is hope, and there is a bright side. There is a silver lining, and it's so interesting. It's so interesting to listening to your concepts. I mean, there is a collection of concepts that you use in your in your mindset is this, and I'm really grateful that I can hear all of this. There is one thing that I want to say, and we will jump to the next topic.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
there is one thing that I discovered, that if there is no God, if we talk about nihilism, and if we talk about if there is no God, or the God left us, the most interesting question today, I believe, is the question of chemistry, and how chemistry, being formed in that way, led to the creation that we have today. Because we're all carbon-based creatures. It's just we're specks of dust, and everything that is here is actually it's from the Big Bang that we know about, or we theorize that it happened approximately 13.8 billion years ago. So the interesting question, I want to believe in a brighter side, but because we need something to believe, and since humans are expansionists, and we want to explore, we want to expand, and by 2030s, they are planning at least 2 expeditions on Mars.
Ooh.
So humans are, they always search. We want to find something. We always ask questions, and this is what makes us unique in a way. The way that we can observe and we can search, and we are so different. We are very much different and very much alike. And so at this moment right now, I think that there may be something, but at the same time, if there is nothing, and it's just a coincidence, pure coincidence, despite the fact of all these cosmic things that we have, like gravity, right? Or like there is still chaos in the universe. There is the dark matter, the black holes that we don't know about. They collide, and they annihilate. So it's like there are so many things, and I'm afraid that it may be just a randomizer. It may be just everything can be everything that happened here, this conversation. If there is a multiverse, a different conversation. I'm afraid, I'm thrilled and afraid that it can be, a random thing that happened. Just an explosion from space that created everything, and then we evolved. So I said chemistry. I started with chemistry because right now is one of the most important studies is the evolutionary biology and how chemistry works, and how molecules, when they are formed together, when they are in the right position, in the right form, they form something different and they evolve, in other words. So I can tell you frankly that I am afraid that at least in my life, in my conscious, I haven't found anything, haven't discovered, and there may be nothing less, just empty void. So I hope that you're right, because it's a hope. But I'm quite pessimistic when it comes to this approach, but we sure need to have these conversations with different people from different confessions, because together we can make some sense out of this. So
the one thing I would encourage you, because it's too long for me to regurgitate on this podcast, I would look up Plato and look up his 5 arguments, his proofs for God. And I gave you 2 today. I gave you the cosmological and I believe the ontological argument. I don't know.
Anthological, yes.
But he has 3 other ones. The thing that always keeps me grounded is that I have not found a good answer, empirically or philosophically, of how the acorn can exist in an infinite regress without an original tree. I haven't found it.
Good luck finding out.
That's the thing, is I don't need to find out, because it in a world that does make sense. I know you talk about black holes colliding, but I think they collide in a predictable way, in a calculatable way. I don't think there's chaos the way that you think there is. And I think the chaos that we see in our world is caused by us humans going against the laws and rules of nature and how things work. I think it's us fighting essentially upstream of what the world is supposed to be. And it's just like if you walk in a river, if you let the river take you normally, it's flat. But if you try and walk against it, it creates all these ripples. And so that whatever that unmoved mover is, just like you were saying, humanity has this urge to reach out, right? C.S. Lewis, do you know C.S. Lewis?
Yep.
He wrote the Narnia series, and he has that really horrible space series he wrote that I don't like at all. He was also a very great philosopher. I don't know if you've read any of his philosophy books. He has this great point that he made called the theory of desire for humans. And he said, and we can move on after this, I promise, it's very quick. He said that every desire that a human has is designed to be fulfilled.
I wanted to say this before you said, because it's my mom. My mom always says that this is the plane with human desires. So we are on the plane, by not like metaphorical plane, like a landscape. We can say that it's a 2D landscape, and everyone has desires. So she always talks about this. So
Your mom's a wise woman. So we have desires for food. We just ate. We had a lovely meal. He cooked me a lovely soup, chili, right? He cooked me a lovely chili, some toast. Stew.
Doesn't matter.
But when we feel hungry, we desire food, and there's an object in the world that satisfies us, gives us food. When we're lonely, we have a desire for company. And in the world, there's a solution. Sitting on a podcast with my good buddy Alan.
Slapping him nicely.
when we're thirsty, there's something in the world that can satisfy us, which is water. But there is a great desire that every single human being has, and it created every religion that exists, and it's the desire for eternal happiness.
It can't be over after we die.
Yeah, so this is that question. It's not just eternal life, because who wants eternal life if it's eternal suffering, like eternity in hell, for instance, like some sort of Dante version of hell? I would rather be annihilated. That sounds horrible. Forever being tortured. But we have a desire, not just for eternal life, but eternal happiness in that life. And yet, there's nothing in this finite world that seems to satisfy that. When we desire sex, we have a means for it. When we desire food, we have a means for it. But we don't have a desire for that. And every person has it. In every culture on earth. That's why we have all these religions that talk about the afterlife. Because it's a universal desire, and yet there's nothing here that does it. And I think that's because there is something out there that satisfies it. So I'm telling you this because I want you to think about it. And I think there is something that can satisfy your desire. And that's it. Spike the ball.
Converted.
Well, I wasn't even saying Christianity. I just meant whatever's out there. But yes, spike the ball. All right, next question.
Next question. So we are on our finishing line.
Oh my gosh, we went so long. I'm so sorry.
No, don't be
Is
sorry.
an hour and 20 okay?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have a slightly
me
longer
nervous.
conversation. No, it's
I got
okay.
goosebumps. I felt bad. I was like, oh no.
No, don't. Do you need to go somewhere right now?
No, I felt bad. I thought you said an hour, and I felt like I always feel bad when I stay in people's homes like longer than.
There is I wanted to ask you questions about Russia and your experience in Russia.
Okay.
So there is our approach, generally speaking, our approach is straightforward. So if we hate someone, we'd rather say it.
I found out yesterday.
Yes. What happened yesterday?
Do you want me to talk about it?
You can talk. I wanted to ask you questions about Russian experience and the bright side and the
not as bright side.
not as bright
Okay.
side. Yeah.
I will say, just before I preface this, Russia has been overwhelmingly positive to me. Russians have been great to me. I really like Russia. I like Russians.
He is a hostage in my house.
He's got a
Send
gun to my
help.
back. Although there were 3 instances, I've been here for a year and a half. There was 3 instances where people didn't treat me great. Every single time it wasn't that bad. I'm fine. I'm an adult. I didn't go home and weep in the shower with my clothes on.
We'll see.
One of them happened yesterday. I was telling him about it. I was walking to the station. I was speaking English with my friend, and 2 skinheads walked by us. And I know they were skinheads because you know this. In Russia, they have a very distinct look. Like they look very distinct from normal people. And they heard me speaking English, and they walked right by me. And I know. Are you putting this on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to not cuss because I want you to get ad revenue.
You can cuss because we can't get red.
Regardless, well, okay, I'll be polite. So he heard us speaking English. He looked over at us, him and his friend, and they looked. I mean, Russians always kind of.
He said, "Fuck you."
Yeah, to me for speaking English, and then walked off. But that's like the worst it really gets. Like the other time, I was trying on a hat at a booth, and a guy came over and was asking me something in Russian, and I responded to him in Russian. I was like, "Oh, I like this hat. How much is it?" And he heard my accent, and he goes, "Where are you from?" And I said, "America." And he said, "Get out." That was the second time that happened. Third time was I was sledding down a hill, and I was yelling in English something like, "Yeah!" Like I was having so much fun, and I got to the bottom. I was like, "This is the best! I had so much fun!" And there was a local village guy, mustache like this. It looks like his name is Anton. So I'm going to call him, I don't know his name, I'm going to call him Anton. Anton walked up to my friend and goes, "Where's he from?" He goes, "He's from America." And it happens that when I went down the thing, I crashed super hard. I rolled and just ate crap the whole way down. And he saw me fall and he goes, "Let them fall again." And that was it. Those are the 3 times where out of my entire year and a half here, interacting with hundreds of people, that the 3 times where people weren't just awesome to me, but everyone else was just amazing to me. Probably even people that didn't like me, they were still polite to me. They helped me if I was confused. Russians are really solid people in a world that continually disappoints me. It's a sad thing to say because I really like people, but Russians continually impress me.
What's the difference to you
between Russians and Japanese and Americans. So what came as a surprise to you when you started talking to Russians? And
I'll tell you a cultural one that to this day still kind of irks me because I'm not used to it. So I grew up in America, and we have a very big service culture. So when you show up, your waiter acts like they're your best friend. They give you your first name, they sit at your table with you, they talk to you like a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they're, always recommending you things, and let me fix your food, I'll give you a free drink, and they do anything they can to make you feel good. You go to Japan, it's the same way. Now I think you already are drawing the conclusion that I have here. When you come to Russia, and it is refreshing, Russians are brutally honest. And what I mean by that is if they don't care for you, you are going to know instantly. They are not putting on a show. If I'm like going to a restaurant, they have no need to smile for me. They might not smile once during the whole meal. I might walk in. I went to a Georgian restaurant with Svetlana recently, and we sat down, and the waiter went, "Oh, like what? What do you want?" And I'm like, "Food. This is a restaurant." But you could tell they just didn't care. In America, even if the person was exhausted and was tired, they would still like put on a fake smile to try and get tips and to, they're trying to almost perform. They're playing a character for you. In Russia, no one plays a character for you. So if I can become friends with my waiter, if I can talk to my waiter and they laugh, I know it's real. If I can make a Russian laugh or smile, that's a real laugh. And there's no fake, like Alan here, if he's laughed at all during this, it's because he actually felt something tickle him in a good way. See that? That was a good tickle right there. But there's a lot of podcasts you go on with Americans that they might just smile and laugh because it's fake. It's not fake to be mean. It's cultural. Like they want you to feel like, oh no, this is a great conversation. We're having fun. But if the conversation sucked, you would know it in Russia. Like you guys are brutally honest with everything that you do. So that's a big one is the service culture here and how open you are with your emotions. I think Svetlana told me when I first showed up here, I was like, why does everyone look sad? She goes, Russians have cold cheeks, like cold outside cheeks, but warm hearts. So when you first meet a Russian, their face is cold. If they're in the street, they're like...
And they're like, do you want to eat borscht?
Yeah.
After you know them.
Yeah, so once you meet them, they will come to my house. We will have borscht. I've made it for you. Come. And then you go to their house and they feed you and they talk about philosophy or invite you on your podcasts and they tell you jokes and anecdotes and you play music. It's wonderful and it's so honest. And so I appreciate that where they're not just just being nice, which means, excuse me, I don't like you that much, but I'll be nice. We do this for like maybe our friends are dating a girl that we just can't stand. Well, we're just going to be nice. In Russia, that doesn't exist. If I don't like you, I'm not talking to you. I'm not going to look at you. Get away from me. And I think that sounds abrasive to maybe some Westerners hearing this, but my God, is it refreshing. It's like, it refreshes your soul to be like, if I have a friend here, that is a friend. That's a homie, to use an old American word from the 90s.
Speaking of friendship, how does it differ from making friends in the United States or in Japan, making friends in Russia? So you are a friend of Svetlana.
Mm-hmm.
Have you become friends with some people, some random people maybe on the streets or...
Beyond her?
Yeah, beyond her.
Yeah, I have, again, I have limited ability to speak. So this is going to be different than me in America where I'm fluent, or in Japanese where I don't like the word fluent, but I'm proficient. I can converse and make friends. In Russia, I'm extremely limited. If you go beyond my 1,500 words, we're in uncharted territory, and the conversation might just die because I don't know where I'm at. I lose the train of the conversation, and I'm like, da, and it gets worse and worse. So, for me, I found having something in common helped. So I go to an Orthodox church here, And at the Orthodox Church, at first, again, cold cheeks. They didn't really talk to me. They were suspicious when I started showing up, as everyone is in this country. If you show up at all, if you show up when you're supposed to be there at a restaurant to eat, why are you here? What do you want? They're suspicious. But I was kind. I was humble. And I think the biggest thing is I was honest. Like, when they talked to me, they didn't see I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I was an American who, in a lot of ways, is very lost and confused. And I need help. I want to light a candle. My grandfather passed away. God rest his soul. He passed away when I was here. I couldn't go to his funeral. And I wanted to light a candle in an Orthodox church for him. I didn't know how. And so I went up with Google Translate in my hand because it's all I had. And everyone in the church saw me typing on my phone. And you could tell that they were kind of judging me. Like, why is he on his phone in church? Like, what's this guy doing? And I go up to the priest after and I hold it out, my hand's shaking because I don't know what to say. And it says, "Hello, Father. I don't speak Russian very well. My grandfather died. I want to light a candle." And he immediately stopped the service. I kid you not, stopped the service and grabbed my arm and drugged me to that little table. I'm sure you've seen it. It has like the cross and there's the table. And he taught me with the choir ladies there how to do it himself. And then that whole church realized, oh, he's foreign. And then afterwards, they all started talking to me like, "Where are you from?" "Really? What state?" "No way. I've been to Colorado." Now I have friends there and they know my limitation, but it's that honesty. And so making friends here is a matter of risk. Sometimes you meet a skinhead, but sometimes you meet someone who just wasn't expecting to make a friend that day. And if you're honest with them and go, "Look, I know this is weird. I'm so sorry to bother you. I'm lost and probably a little afraid. Can you help me?" Russians, so far, 10 out of 10 times come to your rescue. And they stick around. They're good people. I don't want to go into it. I have many stories beyond that where I've met random people that are now friends of mine on the street that I went and had coffee with one of them the other day. I don't want to name them because I didn't get permission to name them on podcasts, but yeah, Russians are sick. Russia is it has surprised me in so many wonderful ways that I never expected, and it continually surprises me. It's such a cool country.
What can you say? What is your message, I should say, to Russians, to many Russians who struggle today because of we are hostages of geography, right? Mm-hmm. So because if aliens come, they just casually drop here and they're like, "What are you? You're humans. Mm-hmm. Why everything is divided? Why you are not permitted to go there and here?" Mm-hmm. So what is your message to Russians who, because you certainly appreciate, I've seen you appreciating the culture, the history, the people around you. So you're treating them honestly, mm-hmm. and I hope that they are giving it to you back, except for those guys who said "fuck you." So, but how can we? It is the times today. Okay, so what is the message what is the advice that you can give to Russians who struggle, who feel that it's not a great place to be? Because you've come here, you've mm-hmm. lived here for 1.5 years, and you are saying that this is a great place, mm-hmm. guys, this is a great opportunity to learn history, to study, because there are so many people there from different backgrounds, from different nationalities. Mm-hmm. There are so many interesting sites that you can visit, architecture and churches as well. So what can you say? Because I know many friends, I know many people who say that they are quiet, they are not happy and satisfied with what's going on within Russia, inside of the country. We're not talking about the outside. Mm-hmm. But so can you give an advice or a message to people who maybe to see something in comparison?
I think there's two things. And I believe most of our problems, I know we like to externalize them. Oh, if we just had a different president. Oh, if we just did this. Oh, if we just did that, then the world would be perfect. That doesn't exist, right? I believe the problems start here. It starts with us. And so what I would say is the very first thing is be kind with yourself. I don't know how many Russians get told that very much. Most Russians I talk to are very hard on themselves. And they've been hard on themselves forever because especially your generation lived through the 90s, which is like
my generation didn't go through the
or
90s.
maybe the one right before you.
Our parents went through the 90s.
That is so much harder and more difficult than I think the entire world gives you guys credit that you got through that. That was unbelievable. I don't think I would have made it through it. And so the fact that you guys went through something so traumatic and you came out on the other side to still sing and dance and to try and make lives that mattered and that are meaningful, that says something to me that I don't think people understand if you're inside of it, because you're so hard on yourselves. Like most Americans, we think very highly of ourselves. We're like, I'm pretty sweet. But
you are.
Thank you. I don't hear a lot of Russians psych themselves up like that. And so the first one is be kind to yourself. If you can start being kind to yourself, I think what'll happen is you'll start being able to be kind to other people. And you can see that I have this, like even that skinhead that said that to me, my first response wasn't, well, F you. My first response was, man, I feel sad for a guy that sees a stranger who looks like he's happy, who's talking to a pretty girl, and I was enjoying my life, and he saw that, and it caused him such anger that he had to lash out at me. That makes me feel sad for him. And I prayed for him that day. I went home, I have a little icon corner, I prayed for him there. Being kind to myself first and realizing that I've gone through so much that the world doesn't even know about. Like, we're not going to trauma dump here, but everyone's gone through stuff. And when you're kind to yourself and you're patient, that's the other thing. I know a lot of Russians, they feel helpless because your timelines are so long here. Like my American timeline, my country's only existed like for as long as some of your streets have. Like some of your newer streets in Moscow. So in my country, if we don't solve a problem in 8 years, we act like it's the end of the world. And for many Russians, there's problems that have been around for 1,000 years or more and that are just still around. And people are just like, well, yeah. And I feel like what's happening is people are being kind of invaded by this sense of unnecessary urgency. And I don't think it's necessary for you to be kind to yourself and to be kind to others and to find joy and to find peace where you're at. Because the grass isn't greener on the other side. If you go to America right now, there's a lot of problems in America right now. A lot. Go to LA, go to Skid Row. Go to San Francisco, where it's just piles of trash and homeless people everywhere because of the horrible policies they have there. Go to France, which is literally covered in giant piles of burning garbage. Japan, probably the most racist country I've ever personally been to. They will not rent you an apartment if you're foreign. Like basically ever. They have a thing called a foreigner tax. All the menus that are in English are like 50% more expensive. And they won't let you order from a Japanese menu, even if you speak Japanese. They're extremely racist, extremely xenophobic. The grass is not always greener on the other side. So be kind to yourself, and that'll make you kind to other people, and it'll open you up to the world, and be patient. This new world that you guys are living in, it changed so dramatically 30 years ago. And that changed so dramatically from the Tsarist times, which changed so dramatically from the serfdom times and the pre-Tsarist times where it's just warring pagan tribes. You're in a brand new space, a brand new world, and it's exciting, and it's new, and it's scary because it's new. And there's a lot of things that remind you of the old things that scare you, and there's a lot of things that maybe remind you of unfamiliar things that might scare you. So now I'm talking to both sides here, right? The people that don't like the West because it's new, and the people that are scared to go back to what was. Both people are scared. Be kind to one another. You're both Russians. You've lived through hell. You'll be okay. I really believe that. Like, there's countries that I've been to personally that I go, I don't know if this place will be okay. I'm confident Russia will be okay. I don't know how long that might take. I think Russia's a gem of a country, and the world's going to see it soon. I think in my lifetime, the world will realize how much of a gem this country is. If you don't think it is, that's fine. I would encourage you to go to another country, and after probably 6 or 7 years there, I bet you'll miss Russia. I bet you'll miss home. I just hope you'll be able to see your country the way that if you left it for 7 years, you would see it. I hope you just don't have to leave your country and your family for 7 years in order to feel that way. I hope you can feel that way today. That's what I would hope. And that's my very long-winded answer. Man, I'm really not concise, am I?
Everything is okay.
Everything's okay.
Everything is okay. It's gonna be okay, Chad.
It's gonna be fine.
Thank you very much for this
My
scintillating conversation.
This was great. I loved it. Invite me back anytime. I will eat your borscht, and we will talk.
I can't cook borscht.
You can't?
No.
I'll
I know how
cook-
it's made. I know
I
how
will
it's
cook you the best borscht you've ever had. I will roast the borscht. I will harvest it from our dacha. I will make you a borscht that will wish you married me.
You just go to some random babushka, you take borscht in a jar and you bring it to me and you...
Don't tell my secrets.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Спасибо вам большое, что послушали подкаст. Это CHAP подкаст с Чадом Циммерманом из Колорадо.